But in his community, they didn't keep birth records the way we did. They didn't have really the same concept of time as we did. So there's lots of controversy about that.
Was he literate? Or you say it's a narrative? He didn't personally write?
He did. He did.
Oh, yes. Well, what did he become with?
Well, it happened along different paths. He first started to become familiar with English language during his time at the Royal Navy. During that time, he attained the rank of able seaman, not in name, but in practice at least. Also, after his time during the 7 Years' War, he became acquainted with these cousins of his master, Michael Henry Pasquale, who was a lieutenant in the Royal Navy. These were his Warren sisters, and they kind of prodded him to teach him how to read. So they taught him how to read. They also taught him how to become more familiar with the Bible, which would become much more heavy influence in his life later on. He eventually learned to write later on, before he was sold by Pasquale.
But he also learned navigation. He learned mathematics. He took every opportunity to learn.
And the rank of able seaman is a pretty exalted rank in the Royal Navy, because you have landmen. This is just basically someone who doesn't know anything about ships. You have an ordinary seaman who is familiar with all the rigging and the sails of a ship. Because this is a time of the age of sail. You didn't have steam-powered boats, you didn't have gasoline engines. Everything was powered by wind. So it's very important that these men of the sea knew how to rig sail ships to travel, to faraway lands. So the rank of able seaman, Equiano was able to, he knew what each sail was, and how to tie it, how to rig it. He also knew how to fix sails as well. The only thing he really didn't learn how to do until later on was how to helm a ship. He learned that after he was sold by Pasquale. So.
Did he get his freedom before or after the
Oh, before. Eventually, Pasquale sold Equiano. Equiano thought that he was going to get his freedom. This is around 1762, shortly after the 7 Years' War. The French-Indian War, as it's known in the States. And so, but Pasquale, for whatever reason, decided to sell Equiano to this captain named Duran. And so, what had happened was that Duran sold Equiano to this planter named Robert King in the West Indian island of Montserrat, very small island. And so King was a very benevolent man. Now, it might be interesting to know that he was a Quaker. And you all maybe know who the Quakers are? Okay. And so, but this peaceful man actually condoned slavery. Now, as Dr. Shelton pointed out, some planters thought of slavery as a necessary evil, or it's a necessity period because of the economics of the time. During this time, there was, especially in the West Indies, there was heavy sugar and rice cultivation. And then that involved a lot of manpower. So, in the planters' view, they needed the manpower to produce all the goods that they were producing for Europe and colonies. And so, King was a plantation owner, but he was very kind to Equiano, and not mistreat him. He was kind of the school of thought that can be best described as ameliorationists. Those who thought that if you treat your slaves well, kept them fed, kept them well clothed and housed, that they would be more productive. There would be less of a need for continuously bringing in new slaves into your plantation. Eventually, Equiano he earned more freedom over time. This captain named Thomas Farmer was a captain aboard a merchant vessel that King had used. Kind of took Equiano under his wing. And for Equiano, Thomas Farmer became a second father figure. well, you say third, consider Pasquale apocryphal. And so, farmer taught Equiano some of the rudiments of navigation. Navigation is very important. The fact that you have to learn mathematics, trigonometry. You have to find longitudes and latitudes in almost any weather. And so he also gave Equiano more freedom. King also allowed Equiano to become a steward, basically a purser aboard a merchant vessel. Basically, buying goods for the men of the ship and also selling them. And so over time, Equiano he got more freedom, more leeway to do as he pleased. There's a situation, though, towards the end of his captivity where King confronted Equiano. They were getting ready to embark on a trip towards Philadelphia. And Philadelphia at that time was becoming kind of a place for the abolition of the slave trade. Although there was slavery there, it wasn't the large-scale plantation slavery of the West Indies and the southern colonies. And so King was afraid that Equiano might run away because there's any place that he could, run away from slavery. Philadelphia was it. So King confronted Equiano, telling him, "I hear that you wanted to run away from me. I treated you so well. I kept you fed. I gave you this freedom. You could go abroad to places like Georgia and South Carolina, do business for me. Why are you running away from me?" And Equiano just said, "No, it's not true at all. I could have run away plenty of other times, but I chose not to." And so King struck a bargain with Equiano that if Equiano was able to procure the amount that King had paid for him, which is about 40 pounds sterling, that Equiano could earn his freedom. This is about 1766. And really in about 6 short months, Equiano procured enough money to purchase his freedom. Long story short. Or short story long.
He bought himself.
Yeah.
And what he would do on these voyages is that he would acquire goods himself. As was said, he was a steward, a purser, and he would buy these goods and he would keep some of them, buy them with his own money, and he slowly built up enough capital in which he could purchase himself, which is essentially what he does. Even though he does continue to work for King,
yes,
who was a slaver. He was a slave trader for a couple of years after that. It was the best business in town.
Yeah.
It was the best way to make money.
Really, Equiano really didn't have an awakening towards the evils of slavery. That he thought it was inhumane, but he didn't consider it as totally immoral until later on in his life. He actually went to the Americas, around the Mosquito Coast, and around where Honduras and Costa Rica and Belize are today, to help this prominent British scientist named Dr. Charles Irving set up a plantation there. And he was hired on as an overseer of some of the slaves that brought over from the West Indies onto the Mosquito Coast. And so even after he had earned his freedom, he was still involved in the slave trade, although it didn't do directly. Okay?
Did Equiano ever have the opportunity to return to his homeland?
Not to his homeland, but he did have the opportunity to return to Africa. He eventually was hired on by the Admiralty Board, which is the board that was in charge of the Navy. During this time, the Navy was the most powerful branch of the armed forces in England. So he was hired on by the Admiralty Board to go to Sierra Leone to be a commissary for this project, which came about through the Society for the Relief of the Black Poor. There's this group that came about during the late 1770s, which tried to ameliorate the plight of the black poor in England. Not just African blacks, but also Indian blacks. Because during this time, the term black is not just ascribed to Africans. It was also ascribed to Indians.